Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for seek power always, to stand in that power that you were here to have. I am so thrilled to have my special guest today, Cynthia Jolicoeur, who was born and raised in Oklahoma and spent 30 years in the Silicon Valley. She was in tech and raised 4 children. And she recently moved back to Mount Aukum, where she's with her horse and her dogs and her cats. And you are going to be so surprised about her path and how she has stood in her power and how you can too. So stay tuned and be here with us. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Diane. I've been looking forward to this just with tremendous excitement. So it's great to finally be here.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, people may not know about you that you are a certified personal defense readiness coach. And this is so important for people to be able to stand in their power and when situations come up to actually know what to do. And you have a 4th degree black belt. So you are an all-around girl who's got tools in her pocket to make things happen. Now, I would love for you to share what is your path? I mean, a lot of people know that I was a police officer and I've been trained and I'm, you know, one of the big reasons about having this show is about people standing in their power. You know, what was your path and what led you to be this kind of coach?
Well, it goes way back to when I was in my early 20s, and I used to love going out to dance and go to nightclubs and dance with my friends. And there was one night where my friends and I came out after a great night of fun, and as we were walking to the car, we got mugged by 2 men with guns. And, you know, in that experience, I felt so powerless and vulnerable, and I didn't know what to do. Like, the only thing I could do was just comply and hope that things didn't go really south. And we were super lucky that all they did was take our, you know, our jewelry and our watches and money, and they didn't want anything else. But I came out of that experience just not knowing how to live so that didn't happen again. And that really kicked off that whole journey of figuring out, like, how can you be safe just in your everyday life? And why the heck didn't I know what to do? I mean, I was in my early 20s and I never learned a darn thing about how to navigate through life and not get into situations like that. So
yeah, I love this conversation. Right? Because people who are listening, in fact, I would like for the listeners to think right now, if something happened to you, would you know what to do? And what are your instincts? And what is it that you are doing that would allow you to be safe? So Cynthia, you know, jump in here about, I know you help people a lot about discovering how to deal with danger, you know, really, you know, the inborn strengths, because sometimes we feel like we have to have that, you know, black belt. And even though it's great that you have that, there are a lot of like simpler tools that people can do to actually stay safe. So let's talk a little bit about that path.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. And that was what I learned. Was I went into martial arts thinking that I was learning self-defense. And
great
along the
distinction.
way, yeah, I mean, along the way, like, I had a ton of fun and I was doing physical fitness types of things, and you know, I loved it. But there was this little creeping doubt in the back of my head that I was going to be able to pull any of that off if, you know, somebody popped up in my house in the middle of the night, or, you know, in a grocery store parking lot at, you know, after I went shopping. And it was sort of a coincidence, but not really, that I crossed paths with somebody who had built a whole system that was based on what the human body is actually designed to do. And so that was a huge shift, because I realized that real world self-defense has absolutely nothing to do with martial arts. You know, they're not incompatible at all. But that's where I've spent the last, I don't know how many years, is in that whole world of, like, what are we as human beings designed to be able to do to protect ourselves? And how can we tap into that? Because the cool thing is, it's always with us, right? It's not a thing we have to have in our pocket. You know, it's not something we have to memorize and become a master of. And you don't have to do what I did and spend 20 years getting a 4th degree black belt in order to be safe, because you can do it today.
Right, right. And this is so important to know, like, these just integral details. I mean, I know you have programs, I do retreats around this. I mean, we are so passionate about people feeling safe in their life and, things that come up in and around fear. And one of the things, you've got some great techniques and tools around dealing with fear. And I'd love for you to share some of that.
Yeah, that's one of the most important parts about how do you get through a situation, or in fact even avoid it in the first place, is really understanding what fear is and not being afraid of it in the first place. So accepting it as a tool. The first place I start is with a fabulous book by Gavin de Becker called The Gift of Fear. And I would recommend that to absolutely everybody to read, because it'll really shift your relationship to fear. The second thing is to recognize that, there's physiological fear, which is what happens to your body when you get startled and scared. And that's the heart rate and, the auditory exclusions and things like that. You're familiar with those, I'm sure.
Yes.
But there's also like this massive area of mental management of fear, because it's the thoughts that we're thinking. It's what we're visualizing. It's the beliefs that we hold. And so in the moment, you need to be aware of what's going on mentally. In fact, even prior to the moment, if you've gone through a process of visualizing scenarios and creating what we call mental blueprints of how you might get through them, it really helps you get out of a fear loop where you're just kind of going, oh my gosh, what's happening? What can I do? Oh no. You got to get out of that loop. And if you've thought about it ahead of time, a particular scenario, and come up with a plan, you get out of it much faster.
Yeah.
But also
absolutely.
Just addressing possible beliefs that you have. So for example, a lot of people hold the belief that if I get shot, I'm going to die. And that's actually not true. There's plenty of evidence, and I bet you've even seen this, of people getting shot and just continuing to act. And so as long as we're holding that as a belief, if somebody has a gun in the environment, we're going to be scared. But when we look at that belief and ask, like, is that actually true? No, it's not really true. There's millions of people that have encountered guns and survived and done well. Then it opens up the possibility of us actually being able to take action. So identifying those beliefs, the associations, like, if you see somebody who's wearing like a tap out shirt or UFC shirt and they've got a busted ear or something, you might just go, oh my gosh, this guy's a fighter. He's going to kill me. Grandma might have given him that shirt, and maybe he was just a really bad wrestler when he was in high school, but like we make up the stories and then we get paralyzed with fear, but we had no proof whatsoever that it's true. So that's a really big piece, that I teach in my programs that I'm sure you work with also, is just like, what are your beliefs and what associations do you have, and are they true? And then the key is really just making a decision to take action. And knowing that, like, that first action you take is going to change the scenario that you're in. So
I love this focus, because the whole thing around the mindset, your mindset is either going to, support you and get through, or it's going to take you out before anyone even touches anyone else. So this is such an important aspect of it, to look at it, because, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about like my training, and in law enforcement, we always are trained that we're going to survive anything. Like, we're always going to make it through something. And then I added, for my own visualization, because I had two young daughters at the time, was that I had to get home to them. So that was an added belief that I had, that no matter what happened at work, I was going to be coming home. And so when you have that survival mentality of what that looks like, I think it's really important that you pointed out about that whole thing about being shot at, because first of all, a lot of times when people shoot, they miss, right? They're actually not that great of a target. Especially you add in emotions and things that are happening. I've actually heard a bullet whiz by my head and being shot at. So that does happen. And the survival rate is really high. And when you have that mentality that you're going to survive anything, it makes such a huge difference in what we're up to. So, I really love that. And how do you feel like this mentality affects you in your everyday life, and how it comes to, how it affects, because I really believe there's these transferable skills when you show up in, originally it was for protection because of the mugging and those type of things, but how have having these type of skills of knowing how to not have fear, or know what to do with the fear, or have the visualization, how's this impacted the rest of your life?
It's been massive. I'll just give you one example. This move up into the Sierra foothills last year was a huge life change. 30 years in Silicon Valley in concrete suburbia where, if I ever had any issues, like help was like right there.
Right.
And now I am not just in the foothills, but to get to my house, you have to go through a creek and up several miles of logging road. So it's an hour to the closest town. If I have an emergency, first responders are going to take forever to get here if they can.
Right.
And, all of a sudden I was scared. I was visualizing, oh crap, what if I get bitten by a rattlesnake and I can't drive myself down the hill? Or,
right.
What if I have an issue with my neighbors, and oh my gosh, I'm going to be alone. What am I going to do? I mean, I've never been like that before. And then I kind of had a, hey, Cynthia, kind of a moment and said, hey girl, you live in this whole world of how do you navigate through fear? So what are you visualizing and what are you believing? And I worked through the process of looking at all the things that were coming up and saying, real or not real, if it's a valid concern, then what can I do? So I was creating what I referred to earlier, those mental blueprints, what can I do if a situation happens? And, it just settled me down, and the other piece that's really helped has just been the confidence, when you know that no matter what comes up, you've got what it takes to get through it. You may get injured or hurt, you may get some dings emotionally, physically, psychologically, but you can get through it. When you know that, then you can face pretty much anything. And, the underlying thing for me that you touched on is that what enables all of that is knowing why it matters that you actually survive something, and you said, I'm going to get home to my kids, I'm going to get home to my family, my kids, no matter what, I'm getting home. And that's something that I cover in all my courses is what is your personal reason to survive? Because you've got one. And
that's
and
you don't want to wait till a situation happens to then determine what it is. No. And this is where that pre-thought comes in, because then that kicks in. That's part of our instinct that actually happens, that we've actually pre-thought that and then that's going to happen. This actually kind of has me roll into, the part about how, I really love to share with people how to design their life versus living by default. And this is a big area of designing. And you talk about how you expand your comfort zone. Talk a little bit more about how you do that and how people can actually utilize that to help keep themselves safe.
Yeah, your comfort zone's nice and safe, isn't it? But there's not a lot of growth there. Yeah, there's not a lot of growth there. And, if we stay in that comfort zone, we're really letting our fear of the unknown or the fear of possibilities keep us in a box. And to me, that's just something that I feel a lot of sorrow around when I see people living like that. And so understanding, how can you get out of your comfort zone and how can you get more comfortable being really uncomfortable, I think is really important. And for me, it started with doing CrossFit. I don't know how familiar you are with CrossFit, but if you go into CrossFit for any period of time, you learn really fast how to get comfortable with being extremely uncomfortable. Yeah. And it builds that ability in you to stay in a moment, even though it really sucks, and know that it eventually is going to come to an end.
Right.
So,
that's important. That's an important skill to have, is to, be, when you are uncomfortable, that you can actually push through that. And physical activity is a great way to do that, because that is actually a good scenario to deal with, because how many times when you've taken a new class, you actually may feel like you're going to die, right? You can't breathe, you're pushing your body to the next level. And so that's a good way to get yourself in a situation of feeling exhausted, feeling like you can't do it. And when you actually can push through those kind of things, that makes a huge difference. It's one of the reasons why I do boot camps, or I do 5 to 8 day challenges, or 8 week challenges, right? Where you're in a group where you are pushing the limit on that. So that's a great reminder around using your body for those kind of things. So what are some of the other things that you do to, really design your life?
One of the other pieces just in the area of getting out of your comfort zone is it's stress inoculation. It's not going, for example, hey, I want to skydive, so I'm signing up to go jump out of a plane next week. It's going, okay, so what are some of the smaller steps that I could take that will move me along so that when I get to the point where I'm standing in the doorway of the plane, I'm not terrified. I may be scared, but I'm not incapacitated. And that idea of stress inoculation is super powerful. It's something that I learned from listening to Navy SEALs talk about going through buds, and how they don't, like with the pool comp that they do where they're underwater and putting gear together and everything, like they don't just get tossed in willy-nilly on day one with a set of gear and told, okay, go underwater and assemble it. They start sitting on the ground, eyes open, being able to talk, being able to breathe, and working through it right there. And it just gets incrementally harder. And I think that often, we kind of tend to skip those steps. We think like, okay, I got to do the big thing now. And sometimes it's too much of a stretch, and we don't lose anything by saying, okay, what are some incremental pieces I can do so that I gradually get more comfortable with the stretch? And then when you reach that big thing, you're like, oh, okay, well, I've already expanded and expanded and expanded. I've already, tested the waters. Now I'm ready for the big thing. So that's another thing that just applies to every area of life.
Right. That is such a great distinction, because you're right. I mean, so many times, and that causes more fear, right? If we think we have to do the big thing, then it has more fear. But if you really look at what is just the next step, like how can it just move you forward to there, you can kind of build up that. I love that stress inoculation. That's really great, but that also lines up with building your courage, right? Building your confidence. These are all activities that build those things up for us. So.
Yes. Yeah, and one thing that I learned from a fellow named Andy Stumpf, who I connected with through CrossFit a long time ago. He's a Navy SEAL. He's got a great podcast called Cleared Hot, and I would highly recommend that for your listeners because they get a real kick out of it. But he was an instructor at BUD/S after he went through the whole SEAL life, and he shared some insight on how he got people to quit, which is another thing that just blew my mind, and I use every day. And it's just that when you have a big thing to accomplish or a big challenge or a big obstacle, if you focus on that whole picture, then you're more likely to quit because it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And if you can focus on like the here and now and that one next piece that I got to do, then you can do that. Right. And so I've been using this like with coaching my daughter through, a pretty major life shift. And it's like, look, don't worry about, 5 years from now, I got to be X. Look at today, like what's the thing today I can do? And that's manageable. Right. And for me, being able to manage myself so that I don't feel overwhelmed is a huge stress reliever. And I mean, how many people do you know when you talk to them, they're just like, oh my God, I just feel overwhelmed, just too much. Yep. I can't cope. And that's where that desire to quit comes from. It's not that we can't do it. It's just that when we look at the big picture, sometimes it just is too big to take in and manage. So it's the flip side of the stress inoculation. It's just look at the piece right in front of you and do that. And it's the same thing, cycle back to the self-defense world. If we're trapped in a bathroom with a sketchy guy who's coming after us, with violent intent, and we're just like, oh my gosh, I need to get all the way out of here and out of the building and, back home. Well, that's huge. But if we're like, okay, first step is to get past him to the door. Right. We can manage that. Right. And then it's like, okay, now I got to get from the door down the hall. Right. And again, this is where these things are such transferable skills. I mean, so many times people think in the mindset that this is just for, self-defense type things where, we hope this isn't happening to you every day, right? These are experiences that are going on, right? They're preparing yourself for what may happen. And I believe that the more prepared you are, the less likely it's going to happen, because I believe energetically, they're not going to choose you because you walk differently in the world, you show up in a different way, is really a big deal. But you can use these same tools for your big projects, right? I mean, a lot of times
people, that's why they need us for coaching and to support and accountability, is because it feels so big. And so when you're able to break those goals down and look like, you know what, hey, if you just did one thing today, if you did 2 or 3 things today versus, oh my God, I've got 20 things to do, that freaks people out. And then it paralyzes them and they're not able to get these things done. So these are great, great skills to have in all the different areas of your life to really look at things from, from a different perspective. So I love that you're doing this, and we need more of this. It's like there are more people that really are thinking and being proactive with that, because there are a lot of things happening in the world. I mean, anywhere from fear in our business to fear in our life to really, how do you move through that much more quickly and more confidently, which is so huge. And so I know we talked about that, what was a disempowering thing with you being mugged. There's other areas too, like with your children. You talked about how that can be really disempowering. How are you using some of these tools to help you in your parenting?
Well, thank God my kids are all adults now, but not too long ago, I had several teenagers, and a couple of them, went down the road of pretty serious substance abuse and all of the chaos that comes with that, lying and stealing and, being out and me not knowing where they were and all of that. And it was really hard to get through. And, talk about fear coming up. There was a lot. Yeah. But going through the process, and for me, it was really essential to focus on the good, because the negative was so overwhelming. And so I just looked at well, what can I do? I can't control their behavior. I can't make them not do what they're doing. Right. I can just be me and be persistently, relentlessly loving and encouraging and positive. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And, every time I saw them, I was just relentlessly positive, and I was trying to call to that tiny little nugget of that essential person that I knew was still in there underneath all the chaos and all of the drama. Right. And it's so powerful to ask those kind of questions. Yeah. I'm sorry. Say that again. Just to stay connected to that part of them that was still there. That was the child that I knew from birth and that I loved so much and that I saw so much potential in. And that I knew had compassion, and that I knew had a kind and generous heart, and that I knew had gifts to bring to the world. So, talking about being empowering, that was really the only choice for me, because if I'd have really dwelled on the chaos and the pain that it was causing, I would have just shut down. Right. And the glory of it is that they made it through, and they're both super healthy, sober, on their paths, finding the things that they're here to do now. And that, I don't think that would have happened. If I had listened to the other voices that said, kick them out because they're too much trouble, they got to learn their lesson, or, you can't allow this, or, I don't understand how you can be so patient with them. If I had listened to all of that nonsense, they wouldn't have come through it the way they did. Right, right. And again, it comes back to mindset, right? Where is our mind and where it's at? And, we may respond to our children in many different ways, and we have to see what's true for us and what's best for the child as well. So really, there's so much, fear that can come up around parenting and, am I doing it the right thing or the right way? And this is where we really need to listen to our intuition and really check in with ourselves and to know that, we're doing the best that we can and to make that happen. So it's important to design those aspects of our life, to really look at, how are we living our life and how we're shifting and doing things that actually support us. So I know you're in a new space now and that you're more remote. And one of the things I love asking my guests is, because I believe environment's everything. The environment that you create that allows you to feel calm, feel confident, sometimes, if there's too much chaos in the space, that can affect us as well. So now that you're in your new space, what is your favorite room and why? I actually don't have a favorite room. My favorite space now is outdoors, preferably at the barn. I'm in the house as little as possible. I get up in the morning and first thing is I go to the barn to be with my horse and to put my little minis out in the pasture and then to play with my dogs. So my favorite space is outdoors.
Nice. I love that. I've had a couple guests say that because, a lot of times, especially they've had jobs over many years where they're inside. And so now that they can shift that to be able to spend more time outdoors is, really great to be able to do. So I love that. Well, let's end here with what is something that has empowered you in your life?
Something that has empowered me. There's been so much. I think one of the strongest ones has really been the last few years being engaged in a community of women entrepreneurs and just talking to so many women who are building, creating, designing these amazing lives of impact. To be immersed in a world of women who are really up to something good just, motivates me to also want to be a woman in the world who's up to something good.
Yes.
That's really been the inspiration. And that's, when I'm feeling a little bit kind of slow or low, talking to one of them, or even just going on and checking out what they're doing, on Facebook or Instagram. And, that's enough sometimes to just go, oh yeah, I remember, like, this is really cool to be able to actually do this.
Yeah.
And build the life I want.
I love it.
That's been the biggest thing in the last few years. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you got to have a community that has your back and that you can, connect with and have that happen. So I love that. Well, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they do that?
Well, I'm all over the place in the social media world. So you can find me on Facebook. I have a business page, but I also have a lot going on my personal page, Cynthia Jolicoeur. You can look me up there. And I have a private, not a private group, but just a group where we have a lot of conversations and some special training and stuff like that. My Instagram is finally kicking off and getting really interesting and fun. And, I'm obviously on LinkedIn, Twitter. Twitter is a new thing for me, so I'm kind of dipping my toes into that.
Out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. But I have a good coach. My older daughter is a PR person, and I went to her and said, what do you do with Twitter? So, yeah, I'm all over those on Instagram. It's Scintillate, Cyntil8, and everywhere else it's pretty much just my name. So I'm sure those will be in the show notes. But
yes. We will absolutely have all that in the show notes, and so people can stay connected with you. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your journey and what you've done to overcome fear and how you really support people staying in their power. So I just want to thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. This has been just great.
Perfect. Well, and for our listeners out there, I just want to thank you for taking your time, for being here with us today. I also will have my free gift in the show notes, which is the liferesetquiz.com. And that way you'll be able to see, having awareness is so important about how things are, working and not working in your life. And building community, as Cynthia was talking about, is so important. So please, share and tag friends and get the word out here. This is an important conversation for people to have. So please subscribe and put in your comments. And if you have any questions that either one of us can answer, please tag both of us and just ask those questions. We're here to serve and to be able to support you. And we just want to thank you again for your time. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Yeah.